Hey, it's Darren here. Yeah, really appreciate the invitation just to say a few things about the life of a genuinely remarkable man. And I can honestly say that Hans changed the trajectory of my life, like he honestly did. Um, and for that, I'm just eternally grateful to him, really, in so many ways. It was interesting when I was watching a tribute that Chef AJ had done and coordinated people to share some testimonies. And it was actually, I suppose, really what was so heartwarming and affirming about it is that you begin to realize the extent to which he impacted people's lives and the genuine interest that he took in people and how he nurtured them along and helped them, I suppose, realize the contribution that they were meant to make. And certainly that's the case for me. I first met Hans would have been about 15 years ago now, and it was in relation to Chip, obviously, and I just met this character, and there was just he was incredibly charismatic, but we Aussies are interesting breeds. We sort of sit way, across the ditch. And anyway, I'd heard about Hans, and then he actually came to Australia, and we started to, I was helping out with the redevelopment of Chip 2.0, and I got to shadow him, and I actually got to go back to the US for a couple of conferences with him. And I got to just watch to see how he interacted with people and how he conducted himself. And, I've learned so much from Hans, but in many ways, it's probably those almost intangible things that I learned that I'm most grateful for. It's I'm not even quite know how to describe it, because I suppose it becomes tangible as you start to document it. But, in reflecting, I thought, what would I say about Hans? And I know in one of the people who was presenting in Chef AJ's tribute, they were talking about the different words they'd used to describe Hans. And I thought, what words would I use? And I actually talked about this with my wife, Sarah. And the first thing that she said instantly was gentleman. And I thought, yeah, Hans was definitely that. What I loved about and admired so much about Hans, and this is in when this quality is in a person, it's often rare to find, but it's just so alluring. Is that Hans, he would step up, before an audience, before a crowd, and could just deliver with such poise, such a statesman, so charismatic, so he just had his way with words, and he had humor. He was just the quintessential, presenter to my mind. And this is, I think, why we loved him so much, his ability to draw people in. But then what was most remarkable about him, he could do that, and he'd sort of blow you away with his skills. But then I watched him so often, come down off the stage and then be talking and interacting and connecting with people, and in particular, often underserved people, but he just had this genuine interest and care in people, and I saw that, that spoke volumes to me. So he was a true gentleman. He was an incredible gentleman, so capable and yet so caring, and I love that. I love that about a person. So gentleman, that was definitely one word that came to mind. The other one is wise. Actually, I looked up to Hans in many ways. It was in some regards, it was certainly a mentor, but really a father figure in some regards to me, because super bright. He knew his stuff so well, but I know people who are super bright and are not wise. But Hans was wise, and he had this ability to be able to see through and to the heart of the issues and connect. And in fact, Wayne Dysinger made this comment. We talked about, he was always just giving not just, content advice in terms of the discipline and nutrition, but but life advice, and he had an incredible perspective on life. What I valued so much about him is the way that he valued family, and he spoke so highly of Lily and his kids and grandkids, and I really treasured that about him. So Hans, he was a gentleman, but he was a wise gentleman, and I really liked his philosophy on life and the way he approached life, and certainly I try and model that. And then the last word that I would, and there are many words that I could choose to describe Hans, but the last word is perhaps the word that I would say is probably the highest calling that any of us can have, and that is that he was a servant. And it was interesting. T. Colin Campbell, in one of his tributes, he spoke about meeting Hans and realizing very, very quickly that this man was here to serve humanity. And I think Hans may even use that terminology. And I think that's the most noble attribute that can be attributed to anyone. Hans was a servant. He was a remarkable servant, and you only have to look at the legacy that he's leaving and the impact of lives. We have no idea the reach in terms of how far his impact has been. But he served humanity. He served his maker. And I love that about him. I think it was just remarkable. And I suppose to wrap it up, probably the last thing, and it relates to this whole service piece, is that Hans, I suppose one of the things I admired so much about him and why I felt such a strong draw and connection to him is because we shared the same faith, and so with that, I know that he used to talk about Chip being spelt as HOPE, hope, and that's what Chip gave, was hope, and he gave hope. He was a hope speaker. That's a beautiful thing. That's a high calling, that, and he did it in the way that he served. And so, coming from our common faith, there's this great parable that's told in the Bible, and basically it's about at the end of the day, what's your story? How's your story told? And there are these beautiful words that this is what I'm pursuing, and I'm sure that I never spoke with Hans about this, but I'm sure that he was pursuing it too. But to hear these words at the end of the day, and that is, well done, good and faithful servant. Hans was a good and faithful servant. He was among the best, good and faithful servants. And so, Hans, you're going to hear those words, brother. And, we hope, we all hope to see you again real soon. And I just want to say thank you to you for all of your work, all of your passion, all of your vision, all of your care, the way that you went about life, the way that you loved, just a staggering light. And so appreciative to you and for all that you've done and the impact that you had on my life in particular.